this is, as it always has been, an informal session. I'm going to ask them a couple of things, and so much was shared on the video that all my thunder has been stolen. So my job becomes harder, but that's okay. Please feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions or you're so inspired to ask anything of Terry or Heath that's reasonable anyway. Don't want to get too carried away with that. And don't hesitate to do so. Watching the video, you've obviously been successful. A lot of things shared there. Wanted to maybe dig a little deeper into a couple of things anyway here as we visit. And the first thing that comes to mind is what, being in Western Kansas, where you're located, what has 2022 been like for you in more specifics? You mentioned crop insurance, pretty important this year, Terry, but either one of you, what's the year been like out there?
I think it's just been, it's been up and down. So we started, start with the wheat crop, last fall, it was dry and then we planted and then we got a nice rain. We got a good stand. Felt like we'd done everything that we could do. And then it just didn't rain again for 4 months. And by the time we came into spring, we was pretty concerned what things were going to be. And we catch some little showers. And so it, kind of felt like it was just not doing real well. And then we came into May and we got a little bit of rain. Wasn't anything we just thought was great, but it was enough to keep our crops going. And we were able to seed all of our fall crops and got them a stand. And again, kind of feel like we've done what we can, and then wasn't really raining again. And we were concerned coming into wheat harvest. And then it just surprised me on what was there when we finally got combines out there. That zero is a real number, and we did have some failed acres, but we also had some that I just couldn't believe that we got wheat that made 50 bushel at the same time. So it's just from being kind of down on what it was to then being really surprised and blessed that we got what that we did. And then the fall crops kind of feel the same way. Didn't rain again. We had some corn that flashed over and burned up. Thought that was an insurance claim, and then we were blessed with a really wonderful rain, and that's put out 6 more leaves and a tassel and an ear, and I can't believe there's going to be corn. So it's kind of up and down, and you just never know what can happen, and that's kind of where 22 has been.
Terry, how does this compare to other years that you can recall? Is this the norm or not?
Oh, nothing is exactly normal in our end of the world out there. We've certainly had years that overall were really good years out there. But I also remember in the 50s and 60s, when my dad was out there, we didn't raise very much of anything. Farming practices were a whole lot different than now too. And I've got to give Heath some credit for, I'm kind of slow about change, but he's pretty good about it. And if change makes sense to me, then I get on board with it. But anyway, back to the way, and that contributed to the crops that we've got this year. As much as the dry weather and like rainfall type things were.
You mentioned the peaks and the valleys, how things go, and managing that risk is highly important here. You mentioned diversification as part of that. Are there other risk mitigating approaches that you've leaned on over the years to deal with those peaks and valleys?
I've always kind of believed in, for lack of a better word, different pots of diversification. And some of them are a whole lot bigger pots than the others. But it's just my style. It's worked for us real well. Instead of all your eggs in one basket, at least we have some choices. What do you?
I think expanding the crop rotation has been one of those. Having cattle is one of those. You know, if it came down to it and had to go down and get a job for a little bit, I mean, every one of those is something that you have to do. Or in the wintertime, if you need to pick up just everyone to help do that. Speaking on the crop insurance thing, I was in Dr. Featherstone's risk management class once upon a time. And one of the studies that we had to do was random number generators for, you know, what our crop yields were going to be over a period of time. And as a part of that, when I would put in the parameters to be able to do 0 to, you know, 40 bushel wheat, and some of the others in the class just thought that you can't do that. You needed to have, you know, 10 or 15 as kind of your minimum. And I said, 0 has been a real number on our farm forever. It really can't happen. And it can happen multiple years in a row. It's not really abnormal, but that speaks to what crop insurance can do. All the credit to him that he did all of that without crop insurance until about 2000. And so was able to show and insure that way that I'm not sure that I could do today.
A bit about cost management, and we're all familiar with what's happened this year, in particular extending into last year with escalation in crop input costs. How have you navigated that?
My strategy was to spend money. I started trying to buy as many inputs as I could starting last August, and securing financing to be able to do that. Not because I had any crystal ball of where it could go, but it was already starting to rise at those times. Knowing that we were going to use some of those things so we got ahead of that, or I tried to get ahead of that and make investments that way just on pre-purchases, but it was owning, but it was also trying to secure availability. There was concerns that even at whatever price you might not be able to get it. At other times, that's specific to this year, and other times I think it would be figuring out how to do the best that you can, just what you got. It may not be getting what you want, just taking what you got.
Speaking of availability, did that amount to making more calls to more vendors? How do you overcome that?
Yes, I typically deal with just the local co-op, and I've expanded to the local co-op. And if neighbors had things around that they were ready to move out of the shed for the end of the year, or start phone calling with other vendors around to find availability to get what I was looking for the right chemistries going forward that I was comfortable using, instead of being stuck with whatever was available. I wanted to know I had what I knew worked for us.
A bit on the other side of it, that is marketing, and we'll start with Terry, I guess, on this, but what's been the marketing strategy or approach or philosophy that you've embraced when going to town with product?
Oh, I've done a little bit of everything. I have a hard time selling the crop that I haven't cut. And that's just me personally. There's other people that in heat will sell, I think, way too much, but that's just my opinion. But it's all worked out for him, you know. But my philosophy is I get harvested and I'll worry about selling it later. Not only selling it, but I think it's also important to kind of keep a little of it in your pocket too, when you do sell it. And that's been a philosophy of mine over time too.
Have you adapted that, Heath, lock, stock, and barrel, or do you?
You know, to some extent, I do, marketing is way down on my skill set. It's not the best, what I have a skill set good for, but trying to be able to take advantage of some prices and be within some parameters that you feel like you can raise, but And this year we had a great run up in prices and I sold some wheat. And then by the 1st of June, I wasn't sure I could even raise what I thought that I was already had sold. And, you know, I had a plan in place with the crop insurance to be able to manage that, but you know, it didn't really feel good that I'd sold something that that's again, a personal thing that I have to get over, is selling something that you don't raise. But marketing things the year after, I think takes just a huge amount of cash flow to be able to then harvest a crop and then sit on it for another year. Once you're there, I think you can do that continually, but that's just a lot of cash flow to try to float, holding that crop. So to answer your question, I'd say maybe 75%.
Anybody have any questions briefly here? Go ahead, in the back, please.
So it sounds like you guys have a couple of differing opinions on some things. So what are been your greatest challenges working together as father and son?
Dad speaking first.
Honestly, we don't have very many challenges. He has his opinion and he'll state it, and I have mine, and we both know what the other thinks, but he just moved more into the man. I mean, he takes care of a lot of the things on the farm anymore. I won't say that everything he wants to do. He doesn't do anything real stupid, okay? Because of that, that's why. But no, he does a good job with this stuff. But we do talk about a lot of different things, but we don't necessarily come from the same starting point, I guess. We end up that, you know, if I don't want to do it very bad, he respects my opinion, and if he doesn't want to do it very bad, which he generally wants to do most everything anyway, I respect his opinion. But I also want to throw something else out there. My wife has been wonderful in my life, not only in raising the family, but she's been, there's about 4 ladies out there in West out in our country that's drove, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of bushels of wheat to the elevator. And they did those things in some trucks that didn't have air conditioning and they didn't have radios and things like that. But she's been wonderful in our success.
In the spirit of fair play, you might talk about your bride as well, who is hardly a native Kansan.
No, she is a native New Yorker, and I am incredibly fortunate because I met her on my front step. She was in town, and then since then, currently owns the newspaper in town and community leaders with 4-H and on city council, and continues to do all kinds of wonderful things for our community and for our family.
So how did you help walk her through the sticker shock of moving from New York eventually to Syracuse, Kansas?
So she came by the way of Arizona, and so had already got a little bit of taste of being out of the city by the time that we met. But I was pretty upfront. I was never going anywhere else.
And there it was.
And then if we can accept that, then it was good. It was good.
Any other questions quickly? Fine. Let's talk a moment about your involvement as a family with the Kansas Farm Management Association. I hope everybody caught that in the video. The Boyd family has been engaged with KFMA for 70 years, which is a remarkable number, to say the least. How you use the data that you glean from KFMA, not just from your own operations, but do you use other peer data from other operations as benchmarking or what have you? Talk more about what KFMA provides beyond just the tax management.
I don't do a lot of benchmarking against others, and I recognize that it's there and kind of see where we stand, for our own versus, the association, peers. But I feel like what KFMA has brought to our farm really specifically has been able to enable policymakers in Washington to enact like the Freedom to Farm Bill that allows us to do more of the row crop that we do today. I think those types of things is what KFMA has done very specifically for our farm and changed the way that we farm, because without that policy out there to be able to, with the old set aside program, we wouldn't be able to do the row crops that we do. And so that's a really broad picture of what I feel like they've brought to our farm, and recognize that has had a major influence in our farming practices.
Terry?
I agree with everything he said. I don't benchmark our stuff against anybody else because all of us are a little bit different. We have different approaches. We have different, we grow different things. How we grow those different things are different. So I don't really use that. I enjoy being able to call up the office in Dodge or Mark and just ask him a question if there's something I don't understand. And they can, if they don't know the answer, they'll get it. And they're reliable in my mind, so we've got friends and neighbors that have been in the KMF for a number of years, and then they're not with it anymore. I don't know. They go to, it's tax things mostly. They go to big accounting firms, but I think mainly they just pay a whole lot more than we do.
A bit on farm policy, Heath, you sort of alluded to it there. There's the next farm bill coming up not too long from now. What would the two of you like to see in that bill germane to your operation?
I think the crop insurance portion of that is incredibly important to continue to be funded. Recognizing the subsidies there make that work for us. Without them, that would not be the same kind of program. And just as the video stated, that's not it's just to keep you in business to be able to get through some bad years. It certainly is not something that you take profit from, but it allows some marketing things that I'm just getting into to have that program backing you up. And then I think that's the main thing. Had some concerns out of the House. They're not as supportive as the Senate on that part of the title going forward. But and then outside of that, just kind of being able to continue to function. If the market says to plant a crop, that's what we should be able to do, or have the flexibility to do those things within our operation. That's what I think is pretty important about it.
My main problem with Washington is ever changing administration one way or another. Then there's a new set of rules, and we got to change things to accommodate them, and it's kind of a flip-flop deal back. I wish just people would use their common sense back there.
And you can attach that to about anything you want.
As a matter of fact.
Questions? Anybody? Okay. I'll talk just a bit about technology. Your philosophy on adapting the next whistle or bell or whatever comes down the pipe, and that might apply to your operation? Have you been aggressive in adapting new technologies or very methodical? What's been the approach by the Boy operation?
I would tend to say more methodical. Alluding to your question earlier, I've been allowed the freedom to make all of my stupid mistakes. And I think that's been really important, to take the new, whatever, and be able to try it. Instead of believing somebody else says, well, this works, and just jump in whole hog, that I can go try something on a portion and fail miserably and accept that it didn't work, or that it was successful, that we need to expand that further into the operation. And having that freedom from when I was younger to be able to do those things helped us methodically adopt more of the technology. I'm not sure I believe GPS was very important when it came out. I thought I was pretty good at driving a tractor, and I didn't need that to help me out. And anymore, at the end of 15 hours, it's amazing how much more tired you are if you don't have that. So it's, yes, you can do that. And when it quits, you can still drive the tractor by yourself, but it's not the same amount of efficiency, just in tiredness. I mean, just as an example, but I think all of those, all of the technologies have a place. May not be an early adopter, but I'm willing to try it early and then see where those things might fit. Might be a different philosophy than him.
Would ask. So Terry, you just turn all of that over to Heath and let it ride?
That's about it. Technology and me doesn't really get along real good. And he is more, he's interested in, I think, the spraying, things like that is terribly important, and understanding the chemistry and working with, not working with him, but watching him understand what he's doing there is really amazing to me. And I do think he adapts. He's not going to be the first one, but he's selling himself just a little bit short there. He's more than I am.
Sort of still in the technology bucket. It's not mechanical, but so you're in western Kansas. Conditions sometimes can be fickle in crop production. What would you like to see in advances in crop genetics that would be helpful to you? It's not necessarily economics, but just out of curiosity.
I think the wheat technologies to be able to continue with the wheat streak, trichome, and high plains virus issues that continue to plague us. Being able to get that solved would be a pretty amazing genetic advance. I think we're on that path, but currently we're just against the WSM2 gene, and the chromite resistance just doesn't quite get you there against high plains virus and trichome virus. So I think those things would go a long ways in our production area. I have seen some pretty tremendous value in the drought tolerant corns. As I said, flashed over with brown leaves and then get rain and continue to grow forward. I think that's pretty amazing. I'm not sure that could have happened in the genetics that was 15 years ago, maybe even 10. But it's those advances continue. So I'm kind of excited to see what they could be. But that would be my wish for wheat genetics specifically.
Terry, things have come a long way in that space over the last, over your career, haven't they?
Yeah, they really have. Just as an example, I planted scout wheat for a number of years, and it paid for a lot of ground, I'll say that. But the genetics that we have right now, with some resistance to mosaic wheat streak, Yeah, and the height of and the sturdiness of the straw and things like that. Those things have changed tremendously. Although I read in some papers and magazines, where they, 50 years ago, I remember the first crop that this would probably be in about the early 70s. We raised some 66 bushel an acre wheat. And I thought that was pretty doggone good. It wasn't over the whole farm, but it was a specific field. And now we kind of raised pushing 90, not on a regular basis, but if everything goes right, it does real good. So we can do anything out there if we just get the rain. That's all there is to it.
Fairly simple, isn't it?
Right?
Questions? Couple more things real quick, maybe tied together. How do you two see frankly, the future of farming in that western Kansas region as you look forward, not only for your operation, but for the surrounding area and getting to the obvious issue of water depletion for those who are running pivots and so forth? With tough years, it makes you wonder how resilient operations can be out in that region. Any thoughts on that?
I think there's a future out there, and I always have. Not only is the things we grow adapted to the region, but we as individuals have adapted to what we can do or want to do. I look at what the price of ground in Iowa is, or even eastern Kansas here, and what it is out in our country, and I think it's terrible out there, but I wouldn't want to be back here. Terrible fun buying. And I don't sell.
I think the future actually is pretty bright. His comment that if we get the rain, we can do pretty much anything, and I think that's true. We have amazing deep soils, and to getting in the right production methods, and then adapting those things to the crops and the crop rotations. I think there's tons of growth that can happen with all of that. To some extent, I think the commodity version of all of those, I think we can do better than just commodity wheat or commodity corn, but that takes some other investments in infrastructure and lease arrangements and things like that. I don't think we're quite there yet, but I think that can do a lot of things. I think it could be pretty exciting with just being able to grow what we can, but realizing that zero is a real number, so being able to manage that risk is one of those things that's the most important part about sustainability. There is managing the risk of the failures will happen, no matter how good or bad you are at it. That's the one thing about it, is Mother Nature will level the playing field against you and all your neighbors.
Yeah, Terry, go ahead.
You plant, and as long as you look at the crop share leaves, your flex brands, cash brands, talk a little bit about your farming program. Just deal with own ground, and you also work with rented ground.
So the majority of our operation is rent ground, and it's all on share lease as of now. I think there's some more progressive leases, but to be real honest, our landlords are not quite ready for that. We've been farming for some of the same people or some of the same families for all of that 70 years. And so we're real comfortable with where that's at. But I think moving further into direct seeding and even to some no-till, I think that those might need to be touched on, but to this point, that's just been incumbent upon us on how to make that work as an operator, because then we get enough benefit in the yield to accept the existing leases. But that's where we've been to this point without trying to be too progressive in our lease arrangements.
Would you say you're growth oriented? If somebody offered you 3,000 additional acres to rent, would you take it on, sight unseen, without doing the same crop share arrangement you've been working with? Would you take it on and take a chance on, with machinery and labor required, or what do you do?
Probably not sight unseen, depending upon a lot of factors, but if it was, a neighboring farm or something that I'm familiar with, I probably wouldn't travel multi-counties away to go pick up that kind of, farm ground. But if it was, around us to be able to do that, it would definitely be, growth oriented towards that, but in moderation. I don't have any ambition to be, a 50, 60, 80,000 acre operation. And those are out there and they're managed well. I just don't think that that's my skill set to be able to do that.
How many acres do you currently farm?
About 8,240.
And how much is land going for an acre out there, if it were available?
In the last year, there's been land traded between 1,300 and 1,800 an acre.
Summer farm,
We do still have summer fallow in our operation. Yes,
no irrigation, or you got irrigation?
no, we don't have any irrigation. Our domestic wells are, over 1,000 feet deep, so that's not something that we can do.
If there are no more questions, I'll finish with a stock question. Oh, there's one. I'm sorry, please.
How much higher help do you have to cover those deep help?
We try to get help, and it's been a struggle, and so, this is it. This is it.
This is it. That might lead into the final question then. And I'll ask each of you, if you would, what do you see as the most immediate challenges for the Boy operation? Is it labor or is it something else? Besides the weather, I should clarify. Yeah.
Labor is a problem for us. We just haven't got the right person. I don't know how come, but I guess availability of good people that we can trust with, I know you guys, a lot of you guys prayed and all of that, but it's pretty important that you have the trust in those people to go do some things like that. That's a big issue for me, simply because I used to think I could outwork about anybody, and now I know I can't.
What do you think the wage rate would be if you found the right person, just exactly the right person that you trust, fill in with your workload and everything else? What do you think they'd have to make?
They probably make 35,000, 40,000.
I guess that's why you're not getting it.
Well,
I'm just.
yeah, it's okay. It's a legitimate deal. I told you I was cheap anyway.
I think some of the availability of labor will be a problem. I obviously can't do all of it, and with him doing less, that presents some challenges. But there's ways to manage around that, using custom work and managing those things that just to be all that we want it to be. But I would say that going forward as the operations side, I think currently the cost of equipment. So the offsets between equipment and labor, equipment's probably on the overly expensive side currently.
you have continued to thrive in your farming in that region, and we appreciate you sharing a bit of your story. Thanks for being with us, both of you, and the best of luck ahead. Thank you. Please thank you.